already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with Now looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest GCSE Sociology revision blast. And I'm joined today by three familiar faces. For those of you who've joined some of our previous 12 sessions, we have Sarah top left, Vicky top right, which through the process of elimination means that Duncan is bottom right. We're live on YouTube and also live on Facebook. So if you are joining us live, and I can see from the dial here that lots of students are joining us, then you get a chance to add your suggested answers to either the live chat in YouTube or the comments box on the Facebook page. And many more students join us on replay or catch up. So we don't get to see your answers in real time, but hopefully you'll have a go at all the activities. Of course, you get a chance to pause the video if you wish to give yourself a bit more time. Duncan, do you want to give us a quick flavour for what we're covering, and then we'll make a start?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to be looking at the education topic today, and particularly looking at some of the debates in education. So the kind of things that you might get a 12-mark essay question on. So not just, we will look at some of the key studies and other things as well, but it's not just those kind of quick recall facts here. It's the debates and the detail of some of those debates. So shall we get cracking with some MCQs to start with from Sarah?
Go for it. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to start off with 6 multiple choice questions based on the key texts to get us warmed up for today. So the first question is, what did Stephen Ball find in his observation of Beachside Comprehensive? So answers in the chat, and if you just put the A, B, C or D for the answer. Have a go. What did Stephen Ball find out? And this really links to these key debates in education. What did he find out? So I can see some good answers coming through there. Excellent. And many of you were right. Well done to Darcy. Well done. There was a little hint on the screen there to give you to ease you into the session today. So can we see the answer, please? It was setting and streaming, often being related to social class rather than ability. And that links to lots of our key debates in education. But one of those really important debates is mixed ability or streamed teaching. Let's go to question 2. So which study within our key text found a link between school processes that happen in schools and the processes that happen in the workplace? So was it moral education? Was it schooling in capitalist America? Was it market forces and parental choice? Or was it origins and destinations? And you can put your A, B, C or D in the chat, so you can commit to an answer. And we've made it a little bit more challenging here by leaving out the authors and just giving the titles of the key texts.
I was going to say, I bet a lot of people know it, and they'll know it by the authors and possibly by the name of the theory, but not necessarily by the name of the key text. But it's good to know them.
Yes. Just making it slightly trickier. We've got a variety of answers coming through, and we've got some right answers in there. So well done. Okay, well done again, Darcy. That's fantastic. So can we see the answer, please? It was schooling in capitalist America, and that was Bowles and Gintis. And you may know that by the term the correspondence principle, or you might know it simply Bowles and Gintis, but schooling in capitalist America was the name of their text. Okay, next question, please. Which study focused on anti-school subcultures and values which are opposed to school? So you might know them as counter-school subcultures as well. Which of our studies? Was it learning to labour? Was it outsiders? Was it schooling in capitalist America? Or was it beachside comprehensive? So which study focused particularly on a group of people that showed these counter school subcultures? And we've got some answers coming in. Fantastic stuff. Brilliant. And we're seeing lots and lots of right answers coming through. So this is one that you know well. Fantastic. And if we can see the answer, please, it was learning to labour. And that was Paul Willis. So you might have known that. Some people refer to it as Willis's Lads or working class jobs for working class boys. So it goes by a few nicknames. But the proper name of the text is learning to labour. Okay, next question, please. Which text discusses how children will come to see that they're part of something larger than themselves through education? So we're looking for a text here which really tells us, that education is a great thing because it allows us to see that we're contributing to something bigger than just our own individual journey. So is it Halsey et al., Origins and Destinations? Is it Durkheim, Beachside Comprehensive? Is it Durkheim, Moral Education? Or is it Bowles and Gintis, Market Forces and Parental Choice? And what you'll notice here is there's quite a few red herrings in the answers. You might see that some of the titles and authors have been mixed up there. So you might be able to use a process of elimination to find the correct answer. And we've got a mixture of responses coming through. And I'm seeing some right answers and some nearly there. Let's have a look at the answer, please, Jim. And the answer there is Durkheim, Moral Education. So this is a real example of a functionalist study which talks about that whole idea of social solidarity and cohesion, and school helping us to realise that we're part of something bigger and we're all working together in that harmonious society that functionalists see. So well done, those of you that put C. Well done, Darcy, again, doing really high success rate today. Excellent. Let's move to the next question. Which sociologist found that marketization processes have led schools to focus on the more able children? And here you've only got the authors and not the name of the key text. So there's an extra level of challenge here. Do you know who the sociologists were that linked these marketization processes to schools focusing on having the more able children and focusing on working with those more able children? Is it Oakley, Warby and Carlin? Interesting mix there. Ball, Durkheim and Halsey? Halsey, Heath and Ridge? Or Ball, Bow and Gurwitz? And we've got some answers coming in. We've got some question marks, but we've definitely got a good mix of answers coming through there. Good stuff. Let's have a look at the answer there. please. And it was Bulbo and Gurwitz. And you'll see, you might, if you're reading around the subject, you'll see a lot of particularly Gurwitz and Stephen Ball individually and together looking at the effect of marketisation on education. So that's a really good study that shows that, it's that marketisation process hasn't necessarily been fair for all of the children in the education system. Right, let's go to the next question, please. Last one for this multiple choice before we move on to a focus on mixed ability teaching. So we're looking here at which text focused on socialization and the transmission of norms and values. So which text focused on socialization and the transmission of norms and values? Was it Talcott Parsons with Learning to Labour? Was it Talcott Parsons with The School Class as a Social System? Was it Parsons with Outsiders, or was it Parsons with Beachside Comprehensive? And I'm sure you can spot that there's been a bit of a muddle up at the bakery here with some of these answers. So have
Parsons
a go.
Parsons wrote a lot, but I don't recognise some of these titles.
Yeah, Parsons did write a lot, but not necessarily all of this. And we've got a variety of responses coming in, which is really interesting. Fantastic. Keep those answers coming. And let's have a look at the correct answer, please. It was Parsons, The School Class as a Social System. So, and of course, it's really important to understand the content of that study, especially for those 12 markers where you can bring that in as an example to strengthen your paragraphs. But it is also important to be able to recognise that a lot of those other studies there were written by different sociologists. So if you know your key text really well, you would have been able to recognise those titles and probably be able to say who they were by, because they weren't all by Talcott Parsons. Okay, brilliant stuff. I'll be handing over to Vicky for a brilliant on balance activity about mixed ability teaching.
Thank you very much. So when we talk about processes in school that affect attainment, one of the key debates that comes up time and time again is about whether we should teach in mixed ability groups or should we teach in setted groups. So we're going to have a look at the pros and cons of each of those. And actually, one of the studies that we have referred to already in the previous activity was Stephen Ball's study on Beachside Comprehensive. And he looked particularly into the effects of setting and some of the issues that came around with that. So obviously, this would be quite good revision for his actual specific study as well. So we're going to have a think first about the advantages of teaching in mixed ability groups. So when you, particularly for GCSE, where you might have students right at the very bottom of the ability range, so working towards 1s and 2s, and you might have students right at the top working towards those 8s and 9s. So what are the advantages of teaching in mixed ability groups? We'll give you a couple of moments. If you can pop something down in the chat window, and obviously if you are watching later, so you're not watching live, then obviously you can give yourself a little bit of extra time by pressing pause. So we're looking for some advantages of teaching in mixed ability groups. Why might some teachers and some students favour that? Have a think about some of the things that might be a good thing about it. Okay, so we've already got a couple of ideas coming through in the chat window. I'm going to give you a couple more moments. What do we think? So we're looking for good things about teaching in those mixed ability groups. Okay, excellent ideas coming through about not labelling, about some students being pulled up, some really good stuff here. So Jim, can we have the advantages on the scales, please? Perfect. So firstly, we have no labels. So no students feels like they can't do it. So there's no glass ceiling. For example, students might in maths, for example, if they're not in the top set, won't be able to perhaps enter the higher paper. So therefore their grades are capped. And there's no self-fulfilling prophecies. We've come across that term quite a few times in previous sessions where students sort of basically do what the teacher believes. So their phrase is what the teacher believes a student will achieve. And the idea of light bulb moments when students of lower or middle ability suddenly get it. It's really good for confidence, and lots of that is linked to that higher order discussion that you perhaps wouldn't have in bottom sets, but you would have in a mixed ability group, because that's something that would draw out lots of thinking between all students. We mentioned in the chat window the idea of weaker students perhaps being pulled up by their more able peers, and also teachers can differentiate by task quite easily, so that works quite well. And yeah, we've also got one coming through right this minute in the chat window saying that you're feeling less likely to be singled out. That's a really, really good point, Darcy. Well done. Okay, let's have a think about the disadvantages then. So we've recognised some really positive features of teaching in mixed ability groups, but there obviously must be some disadvantages because lots of schools choose not to teach in mixed ability. So what do we think? What are the disadvantages of these mixed ability group teachings? Okay, so I'll give you a few moments. Let's see what you can come up with. Okay, again, some good ideas coming through already.
Just thinking, as well as thinking about it in terms of sociological answers, you could think about it from your own experience as well, can't you? I mean, we've all probably been taught in both. Can you think of anything where, obviously on both sides, but can you think of anything where, you know, it's been better because you've been in a particular set?
So we've already got a really good answer coming through again from Darcy. So teachers will have less time to focus on the less able students. That's a really, really good point. Obviously, mixed ability groups tend to be quite a lot bigger as well. Whereas if we're thinking about those sets where you have students that are less able, they tend to be quite a lot smaller. So therefore, you've got less students to focus on. Some good ideas come through. Okay, Jim, can we have the disadvantages on the scales? Okay, so we've got the idea that students might be able to, they might lose confidence as they feel they can't keep up and they're too embarrassed to ask for help. So it might suddenly feel like it's quite overwhelming. They also might feel that everybody gets it, but they don't, which obviously isn't very good for confidence. Brighter students might lose interest if the lesson plods on at a slower pace. You know, they're waiting around for others to finish. That might be a bit of an issue. There's also a big debate around who teachers actually are aiming their lessons for. Lots of people believe that teachers aim for the middle, so bright students are left frustrated and the ones at the bottom have left behind. So that's an argument that's often given against mixed ability teaching. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the idea of setting this time, and this did feature in Stephen Ball's Beachside Comprehensive Study that lots of you will have looked at. So let's have a think about some of the advantages of teaching groups set by ability. And they're not just going to be the opposites of what we've already had. There'll be some other things that you might want to think about. So what are the pros of teaching these groups set by ability? Let's have a think. And again, think about if you have been in if you've been in sets that have been set by ability, what did you like about that? Okay, so we've got some interesting points coming through already. Okay, Jim, can we have some of the advantages up on the screen, please? Super. So it's easier to tailor the content of the lesson to the right level of ability. So there's less planning needed. That obviously is a benefit for teachers, not necessarily a benefit for students. But that fact that you are able to plan it to the right ability is obviously going to benefit students. And it's easier for teachers to stretch those at the top end and support those at the bottom end. You get more individualised support. So those 2 points kind of go together, really. Lots of you also have sort of commented on how bottom sets are more likely to have teaching assistants in them, so therefore there's extra support. And actually it is really good in terms of attainment for top set in particular, not particularly if the other sort of the groups of students, but top set you are able to stretch them a lot more. Okay, so let's have a think about the disadvantages of setting. So lots of teachers don't agree with it. Why might, and lots of sociologists don't agree with it. Stephen Ball in his study did not agree with setting. So what are some of the issues that we see when we set by ability? Okay, and think about some of the things that we've already discussed. So think about some, like Stephen Ball did lots of observation. He made some really good comments about what he thought went on in classrooms when students were set by ability, things that he didn't really think were good things to be happening in the classroom. Okay, we have some interesting points coming through. Well done. It's the idea again of labelling coming up. That's good. So students in lower sets are much more likely to get negatively labelled. Excellent. Well done, Darcy. Brilliant. Some really good stuff coming through. Right, Jim, can we have those up? Again, and it does, you're absolutely right, it does lead to that self-fulfilling prophecy. That's a great answer in the chat window. So that, again, we can see that on the screen. So stigmatization of lower ability groups, the idea of labeling. And we've got the idea that expectations for middle and lower groups are often too low. And that's something that Stephen Ball commented on. He used the phrase warming up students for top sets and cooling down for bottom sets. If they were taught in mixed ability, the attainment tended to be actually lower for bottom sets, even though in theory they should be getting more support. He said you also get perhaps less homework set in those bottom sets. Behaviour expectations are often much lower. Students are allowed to talk more. And he also argued that actually less knowledge was given to those students in those lower sets. And again, that links to our glass ceiling idea, which we identified as an advantage earlier. And he said sometimes you perhaps might see weaker teachers attributed to those bottom sets. So some really interesting arguments on both sides. And it's one of those debates that I'm not sure is ever going to go away. I think there's always going to be people on both sides that sort of you are never going to agree. So I'm going to hand over now to Duncan for a 60-second challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. So we're looking here to do with the debate about social mobility, whether education helps students be socially mobile, is meritocratic, that people can use education to move through the social classes and stratas of society, or whether education tends to reproduce the class inequalities in society. So that's the kind of debate that we're thinking about here. And so what we're going to have on the screen are some key terms and some brief definitions. And all you need to do is match the key term to the definition. So you can just put the letter and the number in the chat window if you're watching live. We've only got 6 to do, 60 seconds, 10 seconds per key term. Reckon we can do this. Shall we see how we do? Okay, see which ones of these you know. Okay, let's go for it. Okay, so our 60 seconds has gone. We've got a few answers coming through. So Darcy, for instance, has come in with ascribed status being people's future role in society is determined at birth. Very good. A few of these are quite similar, and so there was a knack there to try and come up with the specific definition, and that's something worth thinking about for your multiple choice questions, because sometimes you get asked about a key term, and it's not always that all the answers, the wrong answers, are very wrong. Sometimes some of them are close. Oh, we've got F6 coming through from a couple of people. Achieved status, a role someone has worked to achieve rather than being born into. Absolutely well done. Shall we have a look at the rest of them and see what they were? So meritocracy, people's status and wealth is based on their hard work and ability, not based on privilege. And the myth of meritocracy is obviously thinking that that's not true. The Marxist view of social mobility that it's not true that people get their status and wealth based on their ability and hard work. Ascribed status, idea that people's future social role is determined at birth. Unequal rewards, that's kind of Davis and Moore. People will strive hard and work because they want the higher pay. A Marxist idea again, reproduction of class inequalities, that school essentially just resets things and gives the middle class parents' children middle class jobs and working class children, working class parents' children working class jobs. And achieved status links with meritocracy, this idea that people get their status, they've achieved it, they haven't just been handed it. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Sarah now for a categorise activity.
Thanks, Duncan. Okay, so we're going to look at something that students can often find tricky, particularly when they're in the pressure of that assessment environment. And that is making sure that within these different debates and these factors that we look at within education, whether they are internal or whether they are external. So essentially, are they factors that are coming from within the school, or are they factors that are coming from outside the school? And then this becomes a debate in itself within education. And that debate is whether it's internal factors that have more effect, or is it external factors that have more effect? And can the internal factors make up for the external factors? So you're going to get 60 seconds on the clock here to break these down, this list of 8 that you've got here, into 2 groups and say which are internal and which are external. So you can address them separately in the chat, or you can kind of put your groups together in one comment. So can we have a timer, please? So 60 seconds, and you can use the numbers so you don't have to write out the full words under each one. Have a think about whether these originate from in school or outside of school. Brilliant answers coming through already. Okay, and that's your 60 seconds up, and we've seen some fantastic answers coming through. So you grappled with that really, really well. And we can see here, thank you for putting the correct answer up there, Jim. You can see that internal, we've got setting and streaming because that is an internal school process. We've got institutional racism because that's often tied up with the processes and maybe the policies within the school. Teacher labeling, because of course that happens in the classroom, and the hidden curriculum because they're the behaviours that are being rewarded and encouraged by the school. Now, external, and a lot of you picked up on the fact that if it's from the family, then it's from outside of school, so it's external. So restricted speech code is something that we would be coming in from outside and might create a clash or difficulty with the elaborate speech code that's used in school, in textbooks, on exam papers. Parental attitudes to education, they're coming in from outside school and possibly affecting young people before they even start school. And material deprivation, as in terms of economic situation for families, of course, that's coming in from outside school. Although there are plenty of things within school that we see that are designed to compensate that material deprivation. And then we've got gender scripts in the family, which can, of course, affect a lot of, and that links in with our gender debate about achievement and about subject choice within school. So well done with that one, and I'm going to hand back over to Vicky for our next activity.
Thank you very much. So this activity is going to focus on those external factors that we have just talked about in the last activity. And we're going to have a look this time at the factors outside of schools that affect attainment by gender. And we're also going to think about by class in a moment, and then by ethnicity too. So we've got 3 of these give me 3 challenges. You get 30 seconds on the clock for each one. So what I would like you to do is pop in the chat window or pause if you're watching non-live to give yourself a little bit more time. So we want 3 factors outside of school that you think would affect attainment by gender. Okay, so we're thinking about perhaps, it could be, we focus on girls, you can focus on boys, you can focus on a mixture. It doesn't matter. Let's have a think about some of those things that would affect attainment by gender. Can we have 30 seconds on the clock, please, Jim? Thank you. So think about those differences between boys and girls, but not necessarily in the classroom, that would have an impact. Okay, you have 10 seconds left to get something in that chat window. Okay, your time is up. Well done. There's some good things coming through in the chat window. Appreciate it's not 30 seconds is not a lot of time for this activity. So again, if you're watching later at home, then obviously give yourself a little bit more time. But we've got some great things coming up. So in the chat window, we've got changes in women's ambitions. Brilliant answer. Bedroom culture, laddish subcultures, women entering the paid workforce. Some really, really good answers. Well done, Molly. Well done, Darcy. Thank you, Jim. So we can have those up on the screen. So we've mentioned these already now. So the growing aspiration of girls, female role models to look up to in particular. So for example, like politicians at high profile, CEOs. So girls are wanting to put their careers first. That's going to make them work harder at school. Leisure times, girls will often study together. That links to the idea of bedroom culture there, whereas boys are much more likely to be sort of playing games and things. And we've also talked a little bit, sort of linked to this for a long time. There's this idea of the lack of confidence that girls have, so they will study quite, they will prepare themselves really well in advance, whereas boys might be out playing. They're sort of a bit more overconfident about their ability, so don't feel that they need to spend quite so much time studying. And girls mature early. We've talked about this in previous sessions, so they make decisions about their future and they're a bit more proactive about applying for courses than perhaps boys might be. Okay, so really good answers in that chat window there. Right, the second one then. So this time we're looking at the factors outside of schools that affect attainment by class. So we're thinking about kind of, things linked to wealth, perhaps things linked to your culture, like your, whether you're upper class, middle class, working class, all those sorts of things. So 30 seconds on the clock, please, Jim. So think about how this might affect how somebody does in school. Okay. So you have about 10 seconds left to get something in the chat window. Excellent. Time is up. So good. We have got some ideas coming through about material deprivation, cultural capital and cultural deprivation. Well done. Language codes, lots of stuff here. And we've talked about some of these in previous sessions. So again, it's worth going back and having a look at them. Right, Jim, can we have the answers on the screen? Okay, and there are lots of different things that you could have had for this one. But we've talked about this before. So coming into material deprivation, is your home environment, is it suitable for quiet study? If you're sharing bedrooms and things or working in one room, working amongst like all the family goings on, then that probably isn't going to be that good for study. Wealth, can your parents afford to buy in tutors? Can they afford extra resources? Trips, all sorts of things here. And the idea of balancing part-time work and study, and again, this is often linked to material deprivation, where students might actually have to have a part-time job, so there's less time to revise, and that might mean that you're quite often tired in school. So again, that's going to impact on how well you do. But yeah, we've got language codes in this chat window and cultural capital as well. Some really good stuff there. Right, last one then, please, Jim. So this time we're looking at 3 factors outside of school that might affect attainment by ethnicity. So 30 seconds on the clock, off you go. Okay, so try and get some answers down in that chat window in this short period of time. With 15 seconds left.
And remember, there'll be significant differences between different ethnicities, and you're not always looking for why people might achieve less well. It might be why they might achieve better and all that kind of thing.
Excellent. Good point. So we've got some good answers coming through again. Well done, guys. Really good answers today from lots of you in the chat window. So can we have the answers up on the screen, please, Jim? Super. So ethnic minority students are more likely to be living in poverty. Okay, so this would link back to those material factors. Okay, which we've covered in lots of detail in previous sessions. Cultural values. So this is kind of linked to what Duncan was just saying. So we're not just looking for why some ethnic minority students might not do as well. We're also looking for why they might actually achieve more highly. So for example, here on the screen, we can see Chinese families value education highly. So they push their children to achieve. Okay, and we've got that repeated in the chat window with parental attitudes are different from different ethnicities. Excellent, well done. And then right at the bottom, we've got language barriers. Parents might not speak English at home particularly well, so they might not be able to help with that schoolwork quite so effectively. And again, that's come up in the chat window with the idea of sort of those linguistic and intellectual skills. Well done, some brilliant answers. Right, I'm going to hand back over to Duncan for our final activity, which is a word association. So that's one for all of you countdown fans here.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. So last activity of the afternoon. So this one, we've got a word up there, and it tells you the sort of debate that we might be talking about here. The word is competition. So we're thinking about educational policy, and perhaps particularly policies relating to marketisation and parental choice and schools competing against each other. And what I'd like you to do, and this is very tricky, but you've got 60 seconds to see what you can come up with, is to try and come up with a key term or a person that relates to each of the letters in the word. Jim's put one up there straight away. C could be comprehensives. Now, if you could do them all to do with marketisation policies, that would be amazing. But I'll tell you, I didn't manage that. So I've gone for some others to do with other aspects of education, but tried to link it to policy as much as possible. So you will need, for example, 2 key terms beginning with O, 2 beginning with T, 2 beginning with I. So you can't just repeat them when you get the same letter coming up. See how you do. You don't have to do the whole word. Come for some, see if you can get any of them. Okay, I'm sure you'll think of a few. Okay, let's start. Some good ideas coming in the chat window. Keep them coming. Yes, you can have people as well, that's fine. Oh, I like tables league in brackets. That that works well for one of your T's. Okay, some great responses coming in the chat window. Well done. Obviously, people have gone very broad for the whole education topic, but that's fine. We might be able to have a few of them being more specifically to do with policies and also marketisation. But as I say, not all of mine are. Okay, shall we have a look at what I came up with? But you came up with some great ones. So we'll see. I went similar to Jim. I went with comprehensivisation. Start with a policy area. Oh, I went for Ofsted. Oh, we've seen some others in there. Oversubscribed. This could be oversubscribed schools, couldn't it? Ofsted, marketisation, parentocracy, education reform Act 1988. I was on a marketisation role for those ones, and then started running out of those ones. So I went with tripartite system for T, although tables league could have kept us going. League tables could have kept us going with the marketisation policies. Went for ideal pupil for I. We had a few good ones for I in the chat window. We had ideological state apparatus and independent schools. Then had the idea of the ideal pupil, and perhaps schools also look to choose their pupils as well as parents choosing the schools, and schools will want that ideal pupil to try and get up the league tables, for example. Tuition fees, of course, when we talk about policies, we tend to think about schools, but university education, university is also part of education, and tuition fees is part of the marketisation of education. My next I went for ideology. Definitely should have gone for ideological state apparatus or independent schools, one of them, but anyway. And then I liked oversubscribed, someone went with, but I went for OECD ranking. Think about globalization, the impact of globalization on schools. One of those things is looking at how different countries rank schools. They take the PISA tests, or they look at the OECD rankings to see where Britain how Britain compares with other developed countries in terms of our educational achievement, and that sometimes encourages new policies to try and copy those that exist in countries where they seem to do better. So we borrow policies from, say, Finland or Singapore or something like that. And finally, again, back to marketisation and parental choice in the Education Reform Act in 1988, the national curriculum. So it's much easier to compare schools and for parents to choose which school they want to send their kids to if everyone's covered the same stuff and been tested on it. And so you can see whether one school is performing better than another, in theory. Okay, so well done. Some really good responses to that in the chat window. I think we're going back to the sociology green room to say ta-ta.
The green room? You mean the
live lounge?
The live lounge?
The live
I suppose so. It's I love that word association activity is a cracker, isn't it? Because it forces you to think as widely as possible about an area that you've been revising or studying.
Yeah.
And then you use sort of, you twist and turn it to try to get the order of the letters in the right way. But it's a good way of revising.
Definitely.
And that's it for this session. And so just noticing in the chat window that Louise is finishing with sociology on Friday. She's been a regular attendee, a much valued attendee in our live sessions. So a shout out to her in particular. Good luck for the rest of this week, taking assessments and completing your studies. We very much appreciated, Louise, of course, and everybody else who's joined us live with Sarah, Vicky and Duncan leading a great session there. If you've enjoyed it, if we found the session useful live or on replay, give us a thumbs up, and that helps YouTube and Facebook suggest this content for other GCSE Sociology students, either now or in the future. So it'd be great if some future students get to use this session as well. We are back again next week with another session, and then we're looking at how we then develop these sessions to support students who haven't got necessarily assessments, but who are looking ahead to further study and assessments in the coming months and into next year. So we'll post details, all of that on our YouTube site and on our website as well. So keep an eye on and subscribe to the YouTube channel to get that. But I think that's just about it. I don't think there's anything else to say except a huge thanks, as always, to Vicky and Sarah and Duncan and the rest of the team behind the scenes as well who put these fab sessions together. And we'll catch you at a future session. So from all of us, see you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well done, everyone. Bye.
Well done.
Cheers.